Hey there, Shiver Fable Minds family. It's Adam, and I'm thrilled to have you back on our channel. Today we've got a spine-chilling tale that will send shivers down your spine. The title says it all. Do not open doors to strangers at night. A seriously terrifying horror story that will make you think twice before reaching for that doorknob after dark. But before we dive into the eerie details, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our hair-raising stories and bone-chilling adventures. Now, are you ready to embark on this journey into the unknown? Buckle up, because it's about to get seriously spooky. Welcome to another heart-pounding episode on Shiver Fable Minds. I can't forget that awful night, so I still remember that night, and it's still my memory. It's the hardest I've ever helped in my whole life. My sister went crazy. My father and mother left the house for her day. Until they visited my sick grandfather, my sister and I stayed home with the maid living in Fossey's room. Today I was in charge of my sister and home. I did not complete 18 years in high school. I refused to go with my parents until tickets. I stayed home with my sick sister. I sat costume tickets. I was bored and I put the pen down and decided to break a little bit. I closed my eyes. I was feeling very fatigued. I heard the clicks on the door of my room, and my little sister told me, "I can't sleep. I'm scared, brother." The hour was 12:30. She was scared without my mom and dad, and the maid slept at 10. She said I saw a nightmare and scary. I didn't know where I was because the place was dark. I was running and screaming. Someone was running behind me, screaming horribly, threatening me that I would never speak again. And here I felt afraid for her. I tried to reassure her, and she told me in tears, "I was afraid." I told her, "Don't be afraid. It's just a dream." She wasn't affected by any of my words. She remained afraid. I told her, "Don't be afraid, you will not be hated by God." She smiled, and suddenly and without warning, we heard the doorbell ringing uninterrupted. My sister chanted, "Mom is back!" I ran to the door and I quietly followed. But I remembered that they wouldn't be back until the morning, so I rushed to find out who the midnight visitor was. But my little sister preceded me by opening the door. And he was a strange man who said in a rough voice, "Peace be with you," was a big man with a shaggy, beard-haired body. His clothes were old and torn, his eyes pale and his skin black. He was strange, and next to him was a lady in a wide, loose pack. I was afraid of my little sister and I replied nervously, "And you have peace?" The man was surprised by my words when his eyes seemed wider, and he said with wonder, "Is this the house of the pilgrimage, Willing the Master?" I said, "Yes, but he's not home. Dad won't be back until tomorrow." Looking up in a weird way, the woman grabbed his arm and pulled him to tell him something in his ear, and here I watched what with him, behind him was a big black bag strapped with a rope up his limb to his left hand, the man said with wide eyes. I replied stupidly and quickly, "My mother is not there either," and the man replied with a wide eye, "Do you live alone, son, in the house?" "I am an old neighbor of your father, and I came to visit him, and we had a date earlier." I was very surprised by his speech. "So how does my father travel if he falls behind the date, and he has never done so before?" The man said, "We've come a long way for this visit. Do you let us in for some time, my son? And we'll be back again tomorrow." I felt sad for them. They look exhausted, and it's late. I didn't remember that sentence that my mother always said, "Don't open the door to strangers at night." I hastened with fear to my room to call my father and tell him about it and the stranger's friend, who came to visit him at night. The man said, "We've come a long way for this visit. Would you let us in a little time to rest and we'll come back later?" I felt sad for them. They seemed overwhelmed, and it was late. I didn't remember that sentence my mom always said, "Don't open the door to strangers, walk them into the guest room, rush to my room to call my dad and tell him about it." But the network was down, my sister said. "Give them water. Look tired of traveling." I went to the guest room, but I didn't hear any sound, no movement, no breath. Why did I let him in? I don't know how foolish I am. How did I forget my mom's talk? How am I going to get them out of the house now? I walked into the sitting room with my little sister, and I gave them water, and the man said what your name was, and he was putting his hand on his chin like he was thinking about something, and the woman drew him back to her to tell him words in his ear, and then the man said, "Son, why did you let us in the house? I was so afraid I couldn't answer it." And here the man, son, said that my wife wanted to enter the bathroom. I told him, "Yes, absolutely." But the man stopped me, saying, "No, my son. My wife is afraid of foreign men from her, and I don't let anyone accompany her. Do you allow your sister to accompany her?" I looked at my sister. She was sitting quietly. She looked scared. The man said, "Allow or not," I told him nervously. The bathroom on the left of the room at the end of the corridor. The woman turned and the man spoke it in another language. The woman walked up to the door, but her gait was very strange, as if the wind were pushing her towards the door, causing horror in my heart. The woman was flying over the ground. The man screamed loudly, "Don't look at my wife. Turn to him quickly." I felt like I had committed a crime, but I get it. He's jealous of his wife. I accept the woman towards us quickly. I don't know how she ended up in those few seconds. My wife doesn't know how to open the door, and I ask you to let your sister go with her to open it to her. What the man says, the normal door, easy to open. I looked at my sister and I said to her, "Come back quickly," because I was really afraid. The man spoke to the woman in other inexplicable words. The woman followed my sister to get out of the room, and then the man said, "She is a foreigner and does not understand Arabic." I felt afraid for my little sister. All I thought was that Rim would come back, and I felt the time passed quickly. So to follow my sister, the man shouted, "Where are you going?" I looked at him nervously. What he says is my home, and I live in it, and I have the freedom to act, and I ignored it and caught up with my sister and the strange woman. "Are you afraid of darkness or of dying more?" I looked horrified at the man. With horror, he was looking at me in a very strange way, and I can't escape the intensity of fear, and all of a sudden I darken and blackened, and I never see anything with my own eyes. The power went out, I hit the room door, and I ran into the guest bathroom before the guy preceded me, calling my sister. I didn't hear her voice violently opening the bathroom door and calling my sister. I took a scream and I didn't hear any sound. I called, "Where are you, sister?" It caught my attention what was happening in the guest room near me. I heard a sound from the room that was rude, and the woman in black was jumping on the floor. I went up the stairs. I felt so slow, I was afraid. I rushed up, opened the roof door, and closed it as soon as I walked in. And I sat crying in horror. I don't know what I'm going to do now, and what a woman and a man do, and where I'll find my little sister, and where I'll find my sister. That woman is crazy, or she's a djinn. Seeing on the surface was easier for the light of the moon. I went down to the bathroom window, opened the door, looked inside the washing machine, and said, "Don't be afraid." And I drove up to me, embracing me hard, scared. I felt sure, but I was still afraid. We're still at home. We went out the back door through the back ladder of the street. I was holding my little sister's hand walking behind me, and I remembered our maid sleeping on the roof. And I sat crying in horror. I don't know what I'm going to do now, and what a woman and a man do, and where I'll find my little sister, and where I'll find my sister. That woman is crazy, or she's a djinn. Seeing on the surface was easier for the light of the moon. I went down to the bathroom window, opened the door, looked inside the washing machine, and said, "Don't be afraid," and I drove up to me, embracing me hard, scared. I felt sure, but I was still afraid. We're still at home. We went out the back door through the back ladder of the street. I was holding my little sister's hand walking behind me, and I remembered our maid sleeping on the roof. I told her, "Don't worry about her. We'll go out and then come back," she said with fear. "But they'll get to her, brother." I told her, "Don't be afraid, sister." I locked the roof door. I think a woman doesn't know how to open the doors, and I hope her husband is like her. We can barely escape, and I won't come back to put myself and my sister in danger. I'll call the grandmother after we can get out. I think a woman doesn't know how to open doors, and I hope her husband is like her. We could barely escape, and I wouldn't go back to exposing myself and my sister to danger. I'll call the grandmother after we can get out. Don't be afraid, sister. And finally we get to the door of the building. Thank God they didn't lock it. We went out running fast through the small garden of the house, and the basic door of the house is steps away. My sister said, "I can't run. I'm tired, brother." All the windows of the house were opened once, and then all the lights were turned off again, and she turned herself back on as if there were some people playing with the lights and the electricity inside, and the voice of Al-Fai was a scary alight. I held my sister's hand and held her on my back, but before I took one step out of the house, I was surprised by the huge thing that blocked the door of the house like a wall on my way, and I realized from his persistence that he was the weird guy. And I heard him say, Are you afraid of darkness or of dying more?" He took some strange words very quickly and then raised his arm to point to the roof of the house. I looked there. So something hanging and strapped by a rope from his neck. The maid was hanged and dead. And here came a woman in a black cloak whose long black hair covers most of her face, and she's walking like she's flying on the floor, like someone's pushing her back. It's echoing some incomprehensible words and looking at us with terrifying, weird looks. And her husband behind me exchanges those words as he laughs and gets closer and closer. And our house is a strange light. I didn't feel my feet at the time. I fell to the ground with a collapse. I scream horror, and my little sister screams, and we say, "Yar!" And here's the sound of what goes up. "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar," is a dawn ear from a nearby mosque of our house, and that man and his woman. The man and his wife stopped silent. After the rest of the mosques, Allahu Akbar hesitated. Their features changed much, to frown, and then angrily said, "You'll pay the price." And then he disappeared once with his wife. I was shaking looking up at the maid, and my sister passed out on the floor. The police arrived, and my father and mother arrived, and they considered the death of the maid a suicide. No one could believe what I was saying about that genie and his wife. They said that the reason for my little sister's loss of mind and insanity, seeing her maid's corset of suicide, I tried to follow my life, but I'm still very afraid of darkness. I remember the genie's words echoing, "Are you afraid of darkness or of dying more?"